Hello, and thanks very much for being with us at North Park Lounge in Cranberry for Offset with Kinger and the Big Man. Alongside the Big Man, that's Jay Caulfield and our friend Dave Ricchini. I'm Rob King. Thanks very much for being with us. I want to thank US Foods, our sponsor, doing whatever it takes to get you and your customers happy. Check out US Foods. And we also want to thank One Team Media for putting all this together. Beautiful looking set here at the North Park Lounge in Cranberry. So all good stuff. We're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. We haven't really done that yet as we've gotten into our podcast. And the team is in OTAs right now, finishing up today, their third and final of this week before they get into mandatory minicamp next week. Everyone's been waiting all offseason about the quarterback position. So you're just going to have to wait a little longer because we want to talk about some of the other things on this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And let's talk, first of all, about the big move they made in the offseason, Jay, which is to pick up DK Metcalf from Seattle.
Well, I think, look, it's always a talk. If you can get a big-time receiver like that, we've all marveled at what he's done as an athlete, how he plays the game, what he did in Seattle. To me, obviously a huge pickup, and how the Steelers are just going to kind of build around that. And then we get into the cloudiness of the whole thing, but certainly bringing a world-class true number one receiver. What a difference that's going to make going into the year.
And obviously they do that, but then they, of course, Dave here is a Seattle fan, so we should point that out too.
That's why we don't want to leave.
So you've got a lot of knowledge about DK Metcalf. They also traded Pickens subsequently too. So we're thinking for a while, hey, two outside threats, kind of similar types, different body types, but similar type of route trees and expectations maybe about what their strengths are. But then the Steelers decided to move on for Pickens.
Right. You thought when they acquired Metcalf and they were going to bring him in, he was going to draw the double teams to him and then free up George Pickens on the outside. Sort of like what happened with Seattle last year. Jackson Smith-Njigba, second-year player out of Ohio State, came and had a great season. Now George is gone, so now DK is going to get those double teams again. I think Steelers fans will love him as a player. The question with Pickens was, the effort level. If he wasn't getting the ball, was he blocking downfield? Was he taking plays off? You don't have to worry about that with DK Metcalf. He goes hard every single play. Now, you're going to get some penalties where he goes beyond the whistle and gets those 15-yard penalties. That's going to happen. But the energy level is going to be there. He has been the main guy in Seattle before, so he's still going to put up numbers, but what's going to happen in that two spot?
And a willing blocker, which is important for Arthur Smith. He wants to run the football. I think Dave bringing up drawing the double teams is a great point, and we'll see how Jackson Smith-Njigba does now in his second year. Obviously a high pedigree guy, high draft pick, and you expect him to do well. But I think, Jay, in any sport, when one guy is drawing all the attention, that helps make things open up things for other guys. And I think that the Steelers are hoping that DK Metcalf, if they don't acquire another receiver between now and the beginning of the season, and I think they probably will be looking to do that, that sort of effect that great players have on other players around them.
Yeah, I think that's part for me is so true, but the distributing of the football, right? Like if you don't, I think this is part of the Pickens part. I know we talked about plays off. I still think you have to have, if you've got a true number one, Robin, I'm getting off a little bit, but the point is that you got to find another guy that can handle that side of it mentally, that you're not the number one guy. I don't think that was going to be the case with Pickens, right? I think that's one of the other things. So if we do have, when you pick up another receiver, whoever it's going to be, certainly, Rob, I do think when the attention goes somewhere else, it is going to draw. We talk about it in the hockey world. You talk about it in all other sports. For me, it should open up lanes and open up other things for other players to make, and other parts of the team, if you will, positions to make something happen. But until they find a guy that can handle the mental side of being with a guy like Metcalf, they got to find the right type for that.
And you don't know what you have yet in Roman Wilson, who missed all last year. Can he get more out of Pat Freiermuth at the tight end position? Arthur Smith tight ends has always been a big topic. Didn't see a whole lot out of Pat last year, so maybe you get some more out of him too.
Yeah, and we'll talk about, as we get deeper into training camp itself, we'll do a deeper dive. We're going to concentrate on just kind of the new acquisitions for the Steelers, sort of the new look. And I would count Roman Wilson as one of those guys because he essentially the Steelers, for their 7 draft picks last year, essentially didn't play. So you have a draft class this year. You trade for DK Metcalf, which if you're evaluating the draft, to me should be included in that. You gave up your 2nd-round pick to get DK Metcalf, which makes that draft look even that much better to me. Now, it's not apples to apples. No rookies coming in making $30 million a year like they signed Metcalf with the extension. But Roman Wilson, to me, that's like a new guy. What kind of effect can he have? He's a speedy guy. I know in talking to other people that really are into the draft and pay attention to it and have league-wide knowledge of the draft, Roman Wilson would have gone higher in this year's draft class. He would have been, instead of, the where he went last year, he might have been the 5th or 6th receiver taken in this year's class. So that's the kind of player that hopefully is being added in to this mix for the Steelers.
Plus, you look at the system he played in college, Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, so it was a run-heavy system. Is there more? The volume wasn't there in college. Is there more to it? Kind of reminds me of Demaryius Thomas when he was at Georgia Tech. Again, a run-heavy offense. Then he came to the NFL, and he excelled with the Denver Broncos. So you'd like to see what he can do with more opportunities, and you might get that in the NFL.
I think a guy that is really interesting to me was the Steelers' 3rd-round pick, the running back Caleb Johnson. Now, again, we talked about last year, very deep wide receiver class, and so Roman Wilson went further down than he might in another year. Caleb Johnson might have gone further down than he would have in another year because it is such a deep draft. And, of course, we've seen around the league, well, you don't want to draft running backs in the 1st round. Now, that changes when you see Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry maybe dominating and helping to carry their teams as far as they carried them. But when you look at we saw Najee Harris last year, and I think that there was a lot to like about Najee Harris. He ran with a lot of attitude. He would have runs that I think would energize his team. But and he was consistent, and he was available. He was durable. He didn't fumble, except for the one in Philadelphia when they were trying to come back in that game. But he was very sure-handed. But he wasn't explosive. He never had a 40-yard run. The longest run he had as a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers was 39 yards. And they're looking for more explosive plays, Jay. I mean, the sort of notion that you can just maybe grind it down the field, it's changed a little bit, I think, as teams have gotten more explosive plays out of the running back position. And they're hoping that Caleb Johnson can provide that for them.
I get that. But do you think Derrick Henry, to me, is kind of rewritten the script about a running back that big running off that many long runs? I mean, hard to. Saquon Barkley, different animal, different beast. Henry's a different beast. How many guys out there are really getting more? And I get that everybody's. If you can get somebody that's, I just think he's put a different light on. Henry's and Barkley have put a different light on what people are expecting. What were you going to? I think Najee Harris's fate was sealed a couple of years ago as this went on. They were waiting for his contract this time to run out. They were looking in a different direction. But I do think if you think you're going to find guys that are 250 pounds or 220 to 230, like what's Henry? 250. Maybe that might be light.
Huge.
That might be light.
And you're not catching it if it gets out in the open field.
You're not finding it in any other place.
Right.
You might not see that for I don't know if that'll come around again. But because of that, are we looking, or is the general public, are we all looking as fans, looking for somebody to be able to run off more than 40 yards at a pop? I don't think it's out there. No way the game. And the defenders, the pursuit, the speed. I said, what Henry does is unbelievable. It's getting away from what the Steelers are doing, but what are we looking for? What are the Steelers looking for? You want explosive plays, but you want reliability. You want a guy that's going to be there the Steeler way of banging, running hard, and creating things. I think Derrick Henry and what Barkley have done have changed what people are looking at, what they think they can find. Not sure it's out there.
And by the way, just to quickly, before you commentate, as far as explosives, it depends upon how you categorize them. But if it's 10-plus yards in the running game, Steelers had a ton of them last year. Among the league leaders, they had a lot of runs like that. I also think Jalen Warren, again, we're talking about new guys, but it's almost like a new guy for him again. He was hurt all of last year. We never really got a chance to see what he could do. And I think that we're going to see probably more zone blocking. I mean, Arthur Smith had to tailor to what Najee Harris did best. I think we'll see more of that zone running, and that's what Caleb Johnson excelled at Iowa. But I think Jalen Warren will be pretty good at that as well. So he'll be back. Go ahead.
Dave said, yeah, maybe Dave, maybe we could find this somehow. But I'd like to know how many. What are we defining an explosive run? Like you just said, how many of them occurred through the NFL season? How many guys broke it for more than 30 yards?
Right.
I wonder, outside of Henry and Barkley, I wonder what that number would be. and what we're looking for, because I do believe the athlete of today, the speed. So you're the speed of and the strength and the size of defenders today, and their pursuit. How are you going to get? That's why I can't believe what Derrick Henry's done. I mean, what they have done. Those two backs have done. I wonder what that number is.
And obviously, well, first of all, Derrick Henry just got the richest contract ever given a running back after 30 years old. So we're going to see him for a few more years in Baltimore. Yep. And he's utilized beautifully. And also, when you talk about Derrick Henry and you talk about the resurgence of both Henry and Barkley, these are both resurgent guys. Well, look where they went to. Look what their quarterbacks are capable of doing. I mean, everybody that plays with Lamar, their yards per carry are going to go up because you have to worry about Lamar keeping the ball and running. And not quite as much in Philadelphia, but better team around him. Hurts is obviously a guy that can run as well. So that's a factor in these guys' running game, just the atmosphere and where you are. You have to be – I've pointed this out before. I was working in St. Louis when they thought – everybody out there thought Jerome Bettis was washed up, and so they traded him to the Steelers. Well, he went from a team that had offensive line issues to a team that didn't have offensive line issues, and now he's in Canton. Yeah. So a lot of that goes to where you are and who's around you.
Plus the system, too. I mean, look at Denver for all those years.
Right.
With Kubiak. It didn't matter who the running back was.
Right.
Terrell Davis was great, but Atlanta Scary came in, Reuben Drones. I mean, you could throw all kinds of names out there. That system, that zone running scheme, you found a hole those guys could take off. To your point, Jay, about explosive, just looking at some of the explosive plays. So last year, Saquon led the league with most 10-yard carries at 49. Derrick Henry second at 47. Henry had 20-plus yard carries. Saquon 19. So they're top two. So those, I mean, and when you get back to the explosive plays, it's the key was if you broke the line of scrimmage, are you going to get caught? Mm-hmm. Najee Harris got caught last year.
Right.
Jalen Warren did it when he would break through. So I think that's the key. And you're talking about Henry and Saquon Barkley before them. I look back at Adrian Peterson, kind of similar, not as big as Derrick Henry, but that physical runner. Yeah. But when he broke through the line of scrimmage, you weren't catching him. And that's what you need. They didn't have that from Najee. Now with, Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, see what Caleb Johnson can do. Hopefully you get that kind of production as well.
Unless you're Darryl Green. Remember that? Darryl Green tracking down. Yeah. Peterson pointed, he fly. Holy mackerel, could he run? But, it does bring up a great question, and you're trying to find that balance, Jay, always. And the Steelers want to run the ball. They want to be a physical team. They want to impose their will. I think what we saw with the Eagles down the stretch, that's where the Steelers were years ago, and that's what they want to get back to. They talked about how physicality plays in any weather, right? If it's hot out, wear them down. If it's cold out and it's hard to throw the football, well, we can still out-physical you. So you're trying to strike that balance between a back that can hopefully break a big one, but also can get, hey, if there's only 3 yards to get, you might get 4, right? You might get that extra yard because you're a physical runner. You don't want to constantly be, just a home run hitter who puts you 1st and 10 becomes 2nd and 9, becomes 3rd and 11, and now you're in Nowheresville.
I also go with, you mentioned it too about the teams that Barkley went to and Henry went to. If the Steelers over Pat Harris's career, if you're not backing them off the line of scrimmage, good luck.
Right. That's absolutely correct.
I mean, it's difficult. I think those guys still made it work. They would make something work no matter what. They're that dominant of running backs. But if they can pack the line of scrimmage, or they can bring everybody up and not worry about a threat, but now you've got Metcalf and you're going to be able to get the ball to him and all those things with it. That to me is going to play into who. But sorry, they needed something. They were going to go in a different direction. I made the point about I think Harris's fate was sealed a couple of years ago. That everybody was waiting for that to run its course, and it did. And they're moving on. And you got to get somebody that can break through. Warren stood out because of the reasons that he did. McDave, he got through the line of scrimmage and there was a burst. But to me, I think it's all going to, as we said before, get into training camp. What's it going to be like? What are they really looking at? And how does that all play itself out going forward? But I do think it's tough to grade a guy when they're banking on, they almost know what the Steelers are doing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to go against that. And I find the numbers you gave, Dave, and what you looked up and found for us, that it's surprising. It's not surprising Barkley and Henry have done that and how phenomenal that is in this game today.
And the league tells you what they think of Harris. He got a 1-year deal for the Chargers, and they go and draft a first-round running back. So he's not going to be the bell cow out there either. So, I mean, any team could have signed him to a long-term deal, 2-year deal. Nobody did.
Well, it's like Shedeur Sanders, right? The league tells you what you think. I mean, people, I was, one of the draft experts went on TV and got all mad at the Steelers for not taking Shedeur Sanders, and then he goes in the 5th round. Yeah. So, and again, that tells you, now, the league can be wrong. Look, the league was wrong about Dak Prescott. The league was wrong about, in San Francisco, like Brock Purdy, who just signed a big contract extension. So,
one thing with Dave's point, too, about, the league looked at it. Outside of Barkley and Henry, they don't pay enough respect to running backs. So they're not gonna throw a big number at anybody today, really, right? Who's getting him outside after you've been, because how many years into the league, you're beat down.
Right.
Already the running back position is disrespected until these two guys have changed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Right. So it's not, and I agree. It's like a prove it deal, right, Dave? He's got a prove it deal.
Right.
Where, when he moves on. But that's going to be tough if you're in that running back position. You see what happens across the league.
Well, you look at the history of the position, and it doesn't traditionally age well. I mean, think about a guy like Earl Campbell. As unbelievably as amazing as he was dishing out punishment, but you're taking some too. You know what I mean? When you're doing that, and it's a fact. No, we could spend a whole podcast just talking about the running back position.
Real quick on the running back, Jonathan Taylor got paid. Josh Jacobs got paid in Green Bay. Kamara, Mixon, DeAndre Swift. But yeah, to your point, McCaffrey too. We can't leave out McCaffrey.
Yeah, hey, listen, Jacobs went. He's going to Green Bay, and he was a difference maker for them, right? You look at certain things. I agree, but I think outside of that, I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's a tough that position. You're growing up through college. You're playing college football, and you're supposed to give your all every play, and you run like Earl Campbell did. It takes a beating, and then they go, "Oh, hey." Sorry, you've had a long. It's tough. We're going to give you this.
Yeah, and it is disrespected, but it is interesting that maybe some of these contracts came after we saw these guys maybe get a reevaluation of the running back position around the NFL. And it was one of the reasons I was a little crestfallen watching the Super Bowl was because, again, it's clear. I mean, Andy Weidel came out and said it before the season, and they've drafted it. And Omar Khan feels the same way. They have drafted offensive linemen and defensive linemen. Why? Because we just said it. They want to be able to bully teams up front. And as I'm watching the Eagles in the Super Bowl, all I'm thinking is, now how many copycatters, how many teams are, somewhere else saying, hey, maybe we should try playing that kind of football. And all of a sudden, those guys you want to draft are taken a little bit higher in the draft. I mean, I don't know if it affected the defensive line draft this year, because when the first mock drafts were coming out, we saw the guy from Michigan, his teammate, Graham, going in the top 5 or top 10. And then we saw everybody else down in the 20s. Well, when the Steelers got around to picking, 3 of the elite offensive or defensive linemen were already gone.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a copycat. And one more thing is before we get onto the defensive side of the ball about the offense is that it'll be interesting now because we talk about, we're concentrating on new guys in this podcast, and we'll get way more in depth as we get into training camp about the Steelers. But Troy Fautanu is a new guy. I mean, he went through camp last year. I think he's feeling good physically. I had a chance to talk to him last week. And, he's a guy that I think is the Steelers are excited about. He was going to be their starting right tackle. Well, now Broderick Jones is moving to left tackle. You still have youth at center and at right guard. There's a lot of talent there. But it's talent that if you want to play the way you want to play is going to have to, Jade's going to have to step up and be a factor for him.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree. I do. And I think I find this whole part, where we're at now in camp, I mean, with their positioning in camp, and it's like freshmen coming into, a new team, right? When you're a freshman going to college and you're going through your walkthroughs and your 2-a-days and seeing what your testing is, and then you move on. This is the same way for guys now that are being drafted and they're rookies coming into this, the OTAs and what they're doing and trying to make a mark and put a show on. But I do believe, Rob, to your point, if they can't manhandle or dominate the 2 line of scrimmages with what we've seen over the years, I don't know, that's the mark. Again, they're going after it, but I do think they have to be in that position where they dominate, and that's got to be Steeler football, and that's what they're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so let's get to the other line, and that's the defensive line. I think going into the offseason, the Steelers check some boxes, right? And we're going to concentrate on defense right now. And I think that clearly after that loss to Baltimore, if it wasn't already evident to the Steelers, they needed to add defensive linemen. When Cam Heyward was on the field last year, I believe the Steelers were second in the league in yards per attempt against. So outstanding. Cam Heyward out there, they stopped the run. Cam Heyward comes off the field, they were last in the NFL in yards per carry, last or second to last. So down towards the bottom of the league. So clearly that's an area that you identify. And Cam Heyward's, he's been phenomenal. I think he's going to Canton. I don't think there's much doubt about it. To me, there's not much doubt about it. But you have to, he's not getting younger. None of us are, of course. But you need to be able to cycle through some defensive linemen. And so to go out and get Derek Harmon in the first round and get Y.A. Black later on and then make a couple free agent signings, I think that they've shored this group up with front-end talent and with hopefully better depth as well.
Yeah, and Harmon, he was a disruptive player, rushing the passer, stopping the run in college at Oregon. So you think that he's going to help rejuvenate maybe even Heyward, even do more this year, who knows, but then also help the guys on the edge with Watt and Highsmith. I mean, if you get pressure up the middle, just going to free up those guys on the outside. So I think, as you said, it was the biggest need going into the draft was defensive line, and they were able to get one of the top guys at the position.
Yeah, and there's a couple things I like about that. So first of all, before we talk about the player in general, I do think Dave brings up a good point that, look, for all their careers, Cam Heyward and TJ Watt have made the players around them better because you have to double team or even triple team, or, in the case of TJ Watt, okay, maybe you're double teaming, maybe one of those guys is a tight end. That's one fewer guy, or a running back, one fewer guy out in the pass pattern. Guess what? That helps your defensive backs as well. It helps the guy next to you who's going to get single teamed. Well, now, and I'm not suggesting those guys aren't still great players. They are great players. But to get young guys who can help maybe take a little pressure off them, or be able to take advantage of lesser pressure because teams are still concentrating on those great players, it's good to have players that can hopefully do that.
I think the point you made about when you say about keeping, what do you mean to the defensive line? As a linebacker, when I played in college, I want my defensive line to keep everybody off of me so I can move and make my plays that I need to. I think for a linebacker, if you have great linemen in front of you, and to the goal and what you mentioned, Rob, what Heyward brought to the table when he's out of the lineup, and look what happened, or not on a given play. To me, as a linebacker, and all the linebackers and what the Penguins, or what the Steelers have roaming around, if you can keep somebody off of me to let me make plays too, that's a key. And if they don't have that, they're getting to the second layer. The blocks are getting to the second layer, then it's going to be trouble. I have a great defensive lineman in front of me. My linebackers are going to be better.
And by the way, one of the things, and the other thing that Dave mentioned about Harmon being a disruptor in the passing game and the running game, when he was drafted, Omar Khan, I believe it was, talking at the press conference saying he was the best pass rusher among those groups. Like Kenneth Grant was intriguing to me, big, massive guy out of Michigan, and can you plug him in there and stop the run? And because foremost in our mind, freshest in our mind, is that playoff loss to Baltimore.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget that you're playing Baltimore this week, and you're playing Joe Burrow the next week. So you better have somebody that can do both, be able to, and that's what has made Heyward so great. Stop the run, yes, but also get that internal pressure that's going to make an elite quarterback like a Joe Burrow uncomfortable.
Right. No, it's almost your point, like you said before, about when great players are certain where they take the heat off of certain places. If you don't have, Dave, you mentioned it too, if there's no pressure coming up the middle, then there's going to be, again, then they can just rely and make sure they take care of Highsmith and Watt, and then you're back to square one again, and the Steelers are going to be in an uphill battle. For me, I'm still saying I like when my defensive linemen can get pressure, but if they can keep people off of me more, if I'm a linebacker, I kind of like that. Then let us move around, and then I think Dave, for me, if you have to make sure your defensive ends aren't crashing down and disrupting the whole game, which is what these guys have done through their career, anything up the middle would be a plus. I'm not sure what you're going to find. It's kind of hard. I mean, are they really going to find, is that really there from college to pro? It's a whole different, I'm looking forward to see. I know they might have done that in college. Mm-hmm. It's a different animal again.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
No doubt.
So if you had a choice, what would you rather? I'd rather have a guy to make sure he can a run stopper or keep people off the linebackers. I like, as long as they can at least do that.
Yes. Agree.
That, to me, is going to be a win going into this season.
Right. And they're hoping that he can do that, Y.A. Black, and again, some of the free agents that they picked up. One final position that I think, we should mention, they signed Malik Harrison. The linebacker, Cole Holcomb, should be back. So hopefully you're better there. And again, you're just trying to improve the roster. and we're going to get to an overview of the Steelers here, just saying how, getting closer, and we'll talk about this more as we get into camp. But the final position I wanted to hit up was defensive back, because I think that was a situation where the Steelers felt like they needed to upgrade as well. So defensive line was the first priority, I think, on defense. Secondary, the second. Well, you go out and get a guy like Darius Slay. That's a huge addition. And then Brandon Echols, who's a guy that can play in the slot. And then you add Juan Thornhill, which really kind of surprised me that he was available, and they got him. Again, these are all things that should upgrade the Steelers. And when you talk about Harrison and Echols, guys that are also good on special teams, these should be upgrades for the Steelers as well, hopefully in the secondary.
I like Slay. I do. And not just what he can do on the opposite side of Joey Porter Jr., but how can he help Joey Porter Jr.? How can he help Joey make that next step in the pros? I mean, he was great. Slay was great with Detroit. He was great with Philadelphia. Everywhere he's gone, he's had a lot of competition too where he's gone, and he's been a starter. Mm-hmm. So I think that veteran presence is going to help those guys in the secondary and hopefully help Joey make a next step too.
Yeah, it's interesting because you want to be able to, and again, we talk about hand in glove, Jay, and Darius Slay obviously has been a terrific player. You're hoping he's got another year or two in him. And I like the fact that it was a 1-year deal, because I think they're still hopeful that Corey Trice can stay healthy and develop into a quality starting defensive back for the team. So, he's not being blocked by this. But Slay's obviously he's got a tremendous pedigree at the cornerback position.
He's won. There's attitude that comes over with it, too. They're going to be in their backfield. I think, again, Dave's point about helping out Porter, I think those guys all have to raise their game up. But I think bringing in a guy that's won, just like the Penguins and teams have done in hockey, you bring in a guy that's won a cup or whatever it might be. You've been places and been successful. You come here and you have an attitude I think our fan base, once the Steelers fan base wants to see something like that where they're kind of controlling the backfield, and that looks, and he's going to bring that.
Yeah, and I think just in general, as we look at the team, Jay, the fact that 4 of their draft picks basically didn't play last year. So when you start to bring in that amount of young players and this year's draft class, I think overall the goal of the team to get faster on offense and defense, get younger, certainly. Your teams are always trying to do that. I think that right now the arrow's pointing upward for the Steelers in both those things. You're basically adding, like I said, 4 more draft picks from him. Well, 3, obviously, with Adams retiring in the secondary, Ryan Adams. So I do think that these guys should be able to help Ryan Watts, I beg your pardon, should be able to help the Steelers, get younger and get faster like they want to.
I think, too, if you want to buy them time or more time, we're going to go back to what we talked about 5 minutes ago. If your defensive line can get some kind of pressure, mm-hmm. and buy them. Like we can't have a Joe Burrow sitting back there all day long, a double team Watt, whatever they're going to do. If you can't get that up the middle, it's going to have a ripple effect from we just talked about. It's going to have an impact on if the defensive line can't make their mark, and which they've really focused on though through the draft. If they can't make their mark, it's going to impact. We talked about the run play, but it's going to impact the secondary. They can be the best in the world if they have so much time against a great quarterback.
Right.
So that's how I look at it. All the things we're talking about, if they can't really shore up the line, the defensive line, the way they want it, then you got great quarterbacks going to try and pick hard, especially in this division.
And that line, but you mentioned Cole Holcomb, but also Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen, now their second year in a system.
Right.
Playing behind that defensive line could make a difference.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it. We're looking forward to minicamp coming up next week. We're looking forward to training camp, of course, coming up in Latrobe. We want to thank once again One Team for being here, producing this show for us, North Park Lounge, our home here for Offset with Kinger and the Big Man, and of course for Dave Ricchini, for Jay Caulfield. I'm Rob King. We thank you for watching this edition of Offset with Kinger and the Big Man.